it's difficult to explain the way he's impacted ODI cricket. But what we can try and do is talk about his prime years, which I think was from 1996 to 2003. And I think we should start off with some stats to back up why we're saying it's his prime years. During this period, he played 291 matches, scoring 15,954 runs. That is 46% of his career runs. Batting average of 51.96, 55 hundreds, 106 wickets, 52% of his career wickets. All of this in this particular 8-year span. And recently, ESPN Cricket 4 put up a stat saying Smith in 2017 to 2020 versus Tendulkar in 1997 to 2000. Who is the better batsman? Because they have pretty similar averages. Tendulkar had an average of 67.55, whereas Smith has an average of 67.32 in this particular period in Test match cricket. But I think the answer becomes clearer if we look at what Sachin Tendulkar did in a decade of Test match cricket, right from 1993 to 2003 to 2004 season. He played 93 Test matches, 8,312 runs at 61.57 for a period of 10 years, 29 hundreds and 32 fifties. Gaurav, these numbers are giving me some goosebumps just reading them out. So I'm just going to give it to you to try and explain what made Sachin Tendulkar one of a kind player in the 90s.
Wow. Yeah, those 7 years that you spoke about, just scoring centuries in all the conditions. You talk about Australia, South Africa, England, and not just scoring, dominating those bowling attacks. And he was forced to reckon with in Indian conditions. The code, it's all about his technique and just the setup with which he plays a cricket ball. It's not complicated. It's very settled, very solid, and the mindset to go after the bowling. I think that combination is very rare because someone who is so perfectly set up is bound to do better at Test cricket, and they seem to be conservative because in coaching manuals you're not supposed to hit the balls in the air. At least that's what they used to teach when he started playing. So I think it's purely about his technique and the mindset.
And I think you've prepared a special technical analysis segment of his technique for us. So I'd like you to take us through that.
I've tried and come up with a perspective that would show how good a player he was and why did he succeed in all the conditions. So now the three things that I'm going to talking about. There's the stance, the backlift, and obviously the trigger movement. When you look at his stance in his prime years that we spoke about, especially post 96, 98, it's amazing how he never changed his stance. It was pretty similar throughout the time till the time he ended. So it was a very upright stance. He used to take guard on leg stump and sometimes even outside leg stump. In comparison to that, when you see that image of the 92 game, he is very much leaning onto the bat and the head is falling over to the off stump. But because he had such a great hand-eye coordination, the chances of LBW was lessened because of that. Also, rarely he did fall over to the off stump and play around his front bat. So he obviously got out LBWs, but that was again because of the error in judgment, but not because of the technique. But the change in stance in that 96 season started, and I think nobody mastered the art of a perfect stance in modern era better than Tendulkar did. The reason I say this is if you really look at his stance, the head and shoulders are a bit more open than perceived classical stance, and also the hip are in the same place as the shoulders are. Now that's approximately pointing towards the non-striker, and because this setup I think allows him to pick up the ball better with the right eye. Because you should take guard on the leg stump and outside, scoring shots on the offside were greater than if you take a stance on the middle stump. And that's the reason I think he played more straight drives than probably flicks, unless it was really on the pads outside the leg stump. He used to go for the glance. Otherwise, it was mostly straight drives, which just minimized the risk. And we all know straight drives are the best shots to play in cricket because there are no fielders. It's as simple as that. It would work in swinging conditions or the seaming conditions because it also eliminates to go for the for chasing the balls in what we would call the corridor of uncertainty. So it was a perfect stance that he was able to replicate for 664 games throughout his international career. Now, when we actually talk about the backlift, so backlift is something that's very natural as well. Now, he had a low backlift with high wrist cocking, is what we would say. Now, wrist cocking is something that enables the bat to come down with more power. Now, for cricketers who have been born and brought up playing in pitches with low bounce, they normally have this kind of backlift because you have to get to the pitch of the ball quicker than what you would do in a bouncy track, and it allows you to play the drives and the flicks easier as well. Also, because of the power that the wrist generates to the wrist cocking. So Tendulkar had those kind of backlift, but it's amazing how he was never troubled even in bouncy pitches. Now, that was what stood out to me. Because if you see someone like an AB de Villiers or a Brian Lara, they have their wrist almost going towards their midriff or even higher. But with Tendulkar, the wrist used to come up around the waistline, so it was not a very high backlift. Even then, the ability to play on bouncy tracks, we never saw him play a lot of cuts, but the region between covers and point, he used to score a lot of runs. It's amazing. It's just amazing to have that kind of backlift and still be able to score those many runs on pitches in Australia and South Africa. And then we come on to the trigger movement. Now, this is a really interesting part. So Tendulkar was not known to have a trigger movement, whether back and across or just having a big stride forward. It was very instinctive, I think, and I honestly believe that trigger movements are something that's very subconscious. It's very difficult to have a control on that. But then it was very simple, solid, and uncomplicated. Now, this picture that you see on the right, it was game against Pakistan in the 2003 World Cup. In the second over, that famous over where he hit Shoaib Akhtar for a six and two boundaries. The ball is still in the hands of Akhtar, and he has already made a big stride forward towards the off stump. And on the other side, it's against Waqar Younis. There is no movement of the feet, and the ball is almost about to release. It's still in the hands, and mind you, both the balls were pitched around the short of Goodland stuff, and he was able to flick both of them in two different ways. In one case, he did have a trigger movement of the feet, and in the other case, there was no trigger movement. I cannot get over my head that how he was able to do that, to plan against various bowlers in the same game, in the same pitch, to be able to have control on it. This is interesting, but the other really interesting part is this picture. What you look at, it is a game against Pakistan in Taunton in 2000 where he scored 93. The same bowler Shoaib Akhtar, now he doesn't have any trigger movement. Again, the ball is pitched around the same length, around the shot of good length, and it's the flick shot again. Same bowler, there are no trigger movements compared to the Shoaib Akhtar in 2003, where he consciously made a stride forward before the ball is bowled. Just looking at these, to even think about it, how he was able to have control on his trigger movements, because most of the people, they either fall across, they take too big a stride, or they just get stuck onto the crease. Back and across movements, it sometimes gets you in trouble with the LBWs and everything. But yeah, this guy was just so much more adaptable than the rest of them, and I think these are the things which made him so much more successful in various conditions.